Sometimes the people with the quietest voices are carrying the loudest secrets. And sometimes the smallest child holds a legacy worth more than gold, but he doesn't even know it. If you're someone who believes in second chances, quiet miracles, and stories that start in brokenness but end in hope, you're in the right place. Subscribe, like, and share. You never know who might need a story like this today. The wind in Wren Hollow. Tennessee had a way of announcing things before they happened. That morning, it bent the trees a little harder, carried the scent of rain even though the sky stayed dry, and tugged at the corners of Caleb Morris's flannel jacket as if whispering, "Something's coming." Caleb didn't usually listen to whispers, not from the wind, not from people. But that morning he paused. He just dropped off his daughter Ellie at her tiny school 3 miles down the gravel road. She was the one constant in his life, the reason he got out of bed every morning. 10 years old, missing a front tooth, smarter than anyone had a right to be, and somehow able to see goodness even in a place that hadn't given her much of it. Caleb was a mechanic, mostly out of necessity, partly out of habit. His garage was a sagging structure behind his house, stuffed with rusted parts, old engines, and a coffee maker that coughed before it brewed. He was fixing a busted lawnmower when he heard it, a sputtering engine, a car wheezing up the road like a wounded animal. He stood and wiped his hands, peering through the trees. The Mustang was old but proud, red paint dulled by time, one headlight fogged, rear bumper dented like it had once been kissed by fate and forgotten. It coughed twice, then died completely just outside his driveway. She stepped out slowly. One sandal was broken, her left cheek bruised under a curtain of blonde hair, and her son, no older than 6, clung to her hand like a lifeline. Caleb didn't need to ask what had happened. He'd seen enough in his time to know that silence speaks volumes. She didn't beg, didn't plead, just asked if she could borrow his phone. He didn't offer it. Instead, he said, "Pop the hood." They didn't talk much while he worked. Her name was Lila. Her boy was Simon. She didn't say where they were going, only where they'd been away. Far away from a house that looked good on the outside but was hollow inside. Her husband's family had money, the kind of money that forgets people are people. When her husband died in a freak accident, his parents tried to take Simon, claiming she was unfit. They froze her bank accounts, changed the locks, and sent lawyers like wolves. The bruises weren't from them, but they didn't care to ask where they came from either. She'd left in the night with what she could carry. The Mustang belonged to her husband, one of the few things they hadn't stripped from her because they forgot about it. She didn't know where she was going, just that she had to keep moving, until the car decided otherwise. Caleb didn't ask for more. He invited them to stay the night, just until she figured things out. The guest room hadn't been used in years, but had clean sheets and a view of the apple tree out back. Simon was quiet but observant. The way he watched Caleb work, methodical, almost reverent, reminded Caleb of his own daughter at that age. The next morning, the car still wouldn't start. Caleb told her to give it another day. Another turned into 3, then a week. Somewhere between fixing the Mustang and fixing Simon a peanut butter sandwich, Caleb forgot to ask when they were leaving. Lila cleaned the kitchen without being asked. She fixed Ellie's hair one morning when Caleb was running late. Simon helped gather eggs from the coop and followed Caleb like a shadow. There was a rhythm to their presence, a kind of gentle order. And Caleb, whose heart had been boarded up like an old house after a storm, began to feel something shift. But Wren Hollow was small. People noticed. They whispered. One afternoon, a black car with tinted windows pulled into the drive. The man who stepped out had a clipboard, a Rolex, and the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. He said he represented the Whitmore estate. He was looking for Lila Whitmore and her son. Caleb didn't flinch. He told the man there was no one here by that name. But the moment the car disappeared down the road, Lila folded onto the porch steps and began to shake. She hadn't told Caleb her last name. She hadn't needed to. The Whitmores owned more land, more property, and more politicians than Caleb could count. Simon, it turned out, wasn't just her son. He was the last heir to a billion-dollar legacy, and she was the only thing standing between him and a future carved by greed. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the apple tree branches. Caleb stood by the window, watching Ellie and Simon chase fireflies. Lila sat on the porch swing, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. Caleb had a choice: stay silent or stand up. He knew the Whitmores weren't done, and he knew what it felt like to be left behind, to be forgotten. He wouldn't let it happen to them. But what none of them knew, what not even Lila had fully uncovered, was that Simon's inheritance came with more than wealth. It came with a secret clause, one that would soon pull all of them into a battle for custody, identity, and legacy that would shake everything they thought they knew. And just as Caleb began to feel he might be building something again, family, trust, love, the past came knocking with the sound of a judge's gavel and the weight of bloodlines. If you believe love is stronger than legacy, stay with us. This story's not done yet. The morning came with a hush that only forgiveness could carry. Sunlight poured over the porch rails, spilling golden light across a world that had been battered and bent, but not broken. Gideon Blake stood at the kitchen window, cradling his coffee, watching as a soft breeze pushed through the tall grass beyond the barn. The apple tree out back was just beginning to bud again, tender shoots blooming defiantly in the shadow of what had once been grief. He hadn't slept much, but not from unrest. It was a kind of night that hummed with transition, where past and present met in silence and finally shook hands. In the next room, Lily slept on the couch with her son, Julian, cradled against her chest like a second heartbeat. Their faces looked lighter now, no longer clenched in fear, but settled in something rare: safety. Gideon knew better than to disturb that kind of peace too early. He let the morning stretch slowly, letting it fill the corners of the house like warm water poured into cold hands. It had been just days since Lily and Julian stumbled onto his porch like wind-blown leaves, and already it felt as if the walls had shifted to make room. Gideon didn't ask for much, but he knew what it meant to feel unwanted, to be left behind by those who promised permanence. So he did what any man who still believed in decency would do. He opened the door and let them in, but the quiet couldn't last forever. Around noon, a truck pulled up the gravel driveway, black, gleaming, far too polished for a town like theirs. Two men stepped out. Suits, sunglasses. They didn't look like they were there to borrow sugar. Gideon stepped onto the porch before they could knock. The taller of the two flashed a badge, casual but firm. "We're looking for Julian Carter." Gideon didn't flinch, just crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. "You found him. Now why are you looking?" The shorter one spoke, voice clipped. "He's the biological grandson of Charles Whitmore." The name landed like a dropped stone. Charles Whitmore, billionaire investor, oil and tech tycoon, and the same man whose son had cast Lily out like trash when she was at her lowest. The same man who had ignored every plea for help after Julian was born, leaving his only grandchild to grow up in motels and emergency rooms. "Mr. Whitmore is gravely ill," the man added. "He wants to meet the boy before it's too late." Lily had stepped onto the porch by then, Julian at her side. Her face was pale, her eyes wide but dry. "You mean now he wants him," she said, voice low. "Now that he's dying?" The agents didn't respond. "He has no right," she continued. "You want a photo? I'll mail you one. He doesn't get to come in here and pretend to be family. Not after everything." Julian, small and silent, slipped his hand into Gideon's. The boy didn't say a word, but the gesture said everything. The taller man finally nodded. "We understand, but the estate will pass to Julian. Everything, whether you accept or not." They handed over a thick envelope and left without another word. The truck disappeared down the road as quickly as it had come, leaving nothing but dust and questions in its wake. Later that night, Gideon found Lily in the field, barefoot in the clover, staring at the stars. She held a letter from Whitmore's estate in her hands, but hadn't opened it. "You don't have to read it tonight," he said. She nodded. "But I need to, for Julian." She tore the envelope open with trembling hands, and what spilled out was not just ink on paper, but a past trying to apologize too late. Charles Whitmore had named Julian his sole heir, not out of guilt, but, as he said, because that boy deserves a future and I can't fix the past. There was a check, a trust, instructions, even a key to a home in Vermont. But what mattered most was a handwritten postscript. I failed your mother. Don't let my name be the reason you failed too. Lily folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. Then she turned and buried her face in Gideon's shoulder, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of having held too much for too long. The weeks that followed were slow and strange. Julian, once timid and unsure, began to open like a morning blossom. He helped Gideon fix the porch swing, learn how to toss feed to the chickens, even took to sketching flowers with chalk on the walkway. Lily started baking again. The kitchen, once ruled by silence, now smelled of cinnamon and laughter. But it wasn't all sweet. A new problem bloomed, quietly like rot under the surface. Someone had begun sniffing around town, asking questions. Not reporters, lawyers. Lily's former in-laws, the Whitmore siblings, who stood to lose millions if Julian took control of the estate. They hadn't cared about him before, but now they were ready to pretend to. One morning, a woman in pearls and cashmere showed up at the general store, all smiles and syrupy condolences. Said she wanted to take the boys somewhere proper. Gideon met her outside, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Lady," he said, "there's more love in that boy's muddy sneakers than your whole country club. Keep driving." The woman left in a huff, but not without warning. This isn't over. And she was right. Within a week, papers arrived. Custody petitions. Court summons. The Whitmores were making their move. Gideon and Lily sat at the kitchen table late into the night. The papers spread out like a storm. "They're rich," Lily whispered. "They can buy any lawyer they want." "But they can't buy truth," Gideon replied. "And they sure as hell can't buy Julian's heart." So they fought. They showed up in court, not in suits, but in honesty. They brought drawings Julian had made, letters from neighbors, testimony from teachers who had seen him thrive. They brought silence and resilience and every little moment that mattered. And in the end, the judge saw through performance, saw through the Whitmore's crocodile tears and Prada pumps. "This boy has already found his family," the judge said. "We will not uproot him for the sake of wealth." The courtroom buzzed. The Whitmores left without a word. And Julian, standing beside Gideon, smiled like he had just won the world's longest race. That evening, under a lavender sky, they celebrated with lemonade and fireflies. Lily sat on the porch swing with Julian in her lap. Gideon tuned his guitar and played a soft melody that felt like peace finally being allowed to speak. Julian looked up at Lily. "Are we safe now?" And for the first time, she didn't hesitate. "Yes, baby, we're safe." Gideon looked out toward the horizon, where clouds bloomed in soft gold and orange, and thought maybe, just maybe, this was what it meant to come home. If this story moved you the way it moved us, please don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your story too. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Because here at True Soul Stories, we believe every quiet miracle deserves to be heard.